everyone, and welcome. I'm so glad you could join us this evening, or I guess it's almost evening, right? Close enough, for a virtual bite of science that would have been in person, pandemic, so we're doing it virtual instead. First, I just want to very quickly thank our sponsors who certainly pay my salary, but also, some of the support that I get from the office here and when we travel and put on actual events, which I'm super excited to get back to maybe this spring. I know I said fall this summer and it didn't happen, so I'm just loosely holding on to some hope here. But when we get back to in-person events, maintaining a website, all of those things are not possible without our sponsors. And our sponsors for Virginia are Akamai Technologies, Amazon, Amgen Foundation, the Arnold and Kay Clegend Charitable Foundation, BAE, Boeing, Cloudmore Charitable Foundation, the Commonwealth of Virginia, Gilead Sciences, Illumina Foundation, Jack Kent Cook Foundation, Jacobs Engineering, Janssen Pharmaceuticals, Lockheed Martin, May Family Foundation, Psychmedics Corporation, Spark Therapeutics, TC Energy Foundation, Virginia Department of Higher Ed, Vulcan Materials, and WestRock. Well, we have a lot of sponsors here. And for anyone who is new to the Center for Excellence in Education, we were founded in 1983 by Joanne DeGennaro and Admiral Rickover, who is the father of Navy and civilian uses of nuclear power. And our mission is to nurture high school and university scholars to careers of excellence in STEM. And we offer 3 cost-free programs to teachers and students in the United States. So we have the Research Science Institute, the USA Bio-Olympiad, and the Teacher Enrichment Program. There we go. So we have the Research Science Institute, or RSI, is a highly competitive 6-week summer science and engineering program that students apply for in their junior year. That combines on-campus coursework in scientific theory with off-campus work in science and technology research. In normal times, it's hosted in partnership with MIT, but with pandemic stuff. We've actually hosted it the past 2 summers virtually, and it's actually been really, really interesting and quite successful. Participants generally go on to do well at, competitions like Regeneron, and a lot of them going on to advanced STEM degrees. And a fun fact about the degrees, apparently about half of them actually go on to become doctors. Registration, I remember I heard that and I was like, oh, that's interesting. And there's also a good number of lawyers too. Registration opens in mid-November with applications due in early January. But if you are interested in one of your students applying, you don't actually have to worry about remembering the dates because I'll email you about it. And then we have the USA Bio-Olympiad, which is the nation's largest biology education and testing program. It's open to any high school student, and it's pretty much the competition portion is a series of examinations testing knowledge of biology concepts. And then with the top 20 attending national finals for 2 weeks in June, and the top 4 attending the International Biology Olympiad, which last summer we got 2 gold medals and 2 silver medals. And if anyone teaches AP or IB biology classes, there are some phenomenal student and teacher resources that are absolutely free and available to you. And registration is actually currently open for that. And then we have the Teacher Enrichment Program is what we're here for today. And our goal is to provide opportunities for middle and high school teachers to connect with leading STEM professionals, explore some cutting edge research and development, and discover some resources and opportunities that hopefully support your classroom and students. And this school year, we're doing some virtual bites of sciences like we are today. I'm also putting together some college and career panels, which is a new event that we're hosting. And those are really trying to help give you guys, as the kind of resident sort of science career expert, which, I know you're not, but it's kind of the role you end up in, trying to help you guys connect the dots. It's actually pretty easy to get into some STEM careers. So really trying to, make sure you guys know about the community college resources that are available. And then also the ways in which a lot of STEM industry is very much looking to support your students going into these careers. So I think it's a beautiful handoff system that actually exists out there, and I just want to share that with everyone. I am planning to do one for Virginia probably closer to the spring. We are also doing this new event called the Square Root of STEM, where we look at kind of common knowledge topics, but that people don't really actually understand the science behind it. And that's really an effort to share what, why I love science and STEM, and why so many people who work in STEM also love science and STEM, which is it all connects back to itself. It informs each other. And so our first event is actually next Tuesday. To register is all on our website, but we are talking about detection dogs. So we'll have two representatives from TSA talking about working with their dogs and how to train them, and a woman from the University of Pennsylvania who is talking about her research into both the kind of genetic background of detection dogs, but also how they keep detection dogs safe, since they are working and oftentimes trying to find things that are very dangerous. We also maintain our Lab Bench website on our new website as of last spring. So if you have previously accessed the Lab Bench, it is now actually on the TEP website. So I'm really excited, and I'm excited for you guys as well. And lastly, if anyone is ever interested in speakers for the classroom, or you want to connect with a professional because you want to learn something more about something you need to teach in the classroom, you need project mentors, please let me know. I'm happy to reach out to my network of previous speakers and corporate contacts, professors, whoever, and try to help you make that connection. And then real quick, this is what our new website looks like. So the recording today, slides, and maybe some resources will get posted to this when we get through all the editing of the video and whatnot. And I email you and tell you where to find it as well. And then today, I'm super excited to have Michelle Lewis, who is the education manager at the Virginia Zoo, and Noushin Sprossel. Did I say your name? Sprossel?
Sprossel, yes.
Sprossel?
You're good.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm like 4 for 4 on names recently. Who is the Safety, Health, and Environment Director for BAE Systems. So with that, that's all I have. And Michelle, you are welcome to take it away.
All right, thank you so much, Kim. And I'm going to talk to you today a little bit about the intersection of science, education, and conservation, specifically what we do at the Virginia Zoo. And I just want to say that when they initially reached out to me, it was, they said, do you have someone who is in STEM who can talk to teachers? And a lot of times, I think we all get this, a lot of you as teachers, I said, well, I do. And people say, oh, you're STEM. Well, I am. And I come to my profession as the education manager here at the zoo in a little bit of a roundabout way. So I figured the best way to talk to you about my kind of career path was to walk you through it. So that's what I'm going to do a little bit today. And I am not, There we go. All right. So as we start, and yes, that is me with the cheetah cub, because that is one of the very great perks of my job. So I have degrees in environmental science, biology, and a master's degree in biology. I initially went into things full force on STEM. I went straight through 7-8 years of school, I think it was, and did work on the ecology of rare plants in Florida. And I went straight on through, and then I kind of got a little burnt out, I'm going to admit, on some of the research aspects of things. And so I went in and became an environmental educator. And I started out in a state park in North Carolina. And then I continued on. I've worked for the Audubon Society. I've worked for a nonprofit called Living Classrooms in DC. I've worked for the Department of Energy and the Environment in DC out of their Aquatic Resources Education Center, and here at the Virginia Zoo. And I skipped one, you might notice. I was also a transportation ecologist and ecology team leader at the Georgia Department of Transportation. And You're going to say, what does that have to do with environmental education? And how did this happen? And that's where my sort of twist and turn of my career go. And I'm going to get there, but I promise you, I'm going to tie them all together because they all work perfectly into what I do now here at the zoo. So first off, where do informal science educators work? Because that's really, as environmental educator, that's what I call myself, an informal science educator. Everywhere. So basically, if you are doing any sort of an education at an institution or like the aquarium, the botanic garden, the government has them, nonprofits, state parks, national parks, zoos. If you are outside the classroom, you're generally considered an informal science educator. And just kind of a thought I want you guys to think as we go through this, if you've used informal science educators in your classroom, because I bet you have. And I'm looking through some names and a couple of them sound familiar, so I may have actually talked to one or two of you before. So what does an informal science educator do? And we do a lot. Here at the zoo, we teach about science. So we teach about the animals at the zoo, but we do more than just that. We also do interpretation, which is really building that connection between the people and our resources, which are, for us, our animals. We create the lesson plans. We also create signage. At the zoo, I am in charge of fact checking all of the signs that we put out to make sure that they are correct. And also our department works on making sure that they're cohesive and that they are leading you to learn about what we're trying to have you learn about. I also, there's a little dollar sign out there. I have to go after grants and money to make these programs happen, just as I know a lot of you do, and a lot of you will fund programs like mine to come into your classrooms. So we do a lot of that. And then what kind of a background does an informal science educator need? So this is where a lot of people in my field come with my kind of background. I didn't have a formal teaching degree. I didn't go through and take a pedagogy class or do any of that. I had that background in science, but then I also had a passion for it. And so a lot of us come from that, but we also have to be that outgoing personality, that person who wants to talk to you, who wants to connect with the kids. I think sometimes you think of that scientist as that person in the lab coat who doesn't want to interact with people. And there are far more of us who really do and become that educator. And then what does education, informal science education, look like at the Virginia Zoo today? And it looks like camp. It looks like events. We have our Zoo Boo coming up, and we'll be having our educators out doing chats at the animals. It looks like classrooms coming in. It looks like scout programs and toddler programs and interacting with animals on our zoo live stage. It's kind of all over. And then something for especially my high school teachers is, how do you get a job in informal or environmental education? And here I've got for you a couple resources and some job boards that you can go to. And that's a great way to look at what's out there. The AZA is the Association of Zoos and Aquariums, and that has not just education jobs, but all jobs available in zoo and aquariums on it. So that's a great place for if you've got kids who are really interested in that. And you don't even have to love science. You don't have to be a keeper to work at a zoo. And I can talk about that at another time because we also do stuff talking about careers, but just some resources for you. And then I promised that I would get back to this for you. So back to the transportation ecologist position. And I apologize if some of this is a little base level for some of you, but I've found that when I've talked before, not everybody knows what an ecologist is or does. So I'm going to go through some of that to start with. So an ecologist is someone who studies the interrelationships between organisms and their environment. And where do they work? They actually work everywhere too. So universities, research institutions, museums, zoos, aquariums, like myself, they work at nonprofits, state and local government, private, federal government as well, and private consultants as well. And as a transportation ecologist, when I worked for the Department of Transportation, our goal was to avoid and minimize impacts to ecological resources. And those resources include things like streams, open waters, wetlands, and protected species in their habitats. So these are all of the things that are regulated in some manner, whether it's by the state or it could be by the federal government. And our job was to go out and identify what's there and then work with the designers in the Department of Transportation to make sure that we were avoiding and minimizing to the best of our ability. And then if we couldn't, we would mitigate that. So I said I'm a field ecologist, but a lot of work is spent on the computer at first. You've got to do a lot of your background research. First, you need to know where the project is. And at the Department of Transportation, we would get road widenings, we would get bridge replacements, new roads, those 4-leaf clover interchanges that everyone hates. Yeah, we went out and we made sure that those went in too. And any sort of project that would disturb soil, basically, was something that we would have to go and check. Is there possibly a listed species? Is there a water? Is there something that we protect that we need to check on? So a lot of very hard, yep, you can see my coworker Jamie down here was working very hard that day with his feet up in his desk. And then you've got to ground truth it. So you can't just rely on Google Maps. Yeah, there's a water there. No, there's not a water there. You've got to go out and actually identify it. Identify the wetlands, the streams, and the open waters. That means kind of a lake or a pond. And then you're going to evaluate and document what sort of habitat there is and what potential for species for protected plants and animals, for what the government calls critical habitats, and then essential fish habitat, which is something that is regulated by the well, it's NIMFs, and I cannot for the life of me at this point think about what NIMF stands for. National Marine Fisheries. That's where we go. And then also, because I was in the state of Georgia, the state of Georgia had protections on the buffers for a river or a stream as well. So you had to make sure if you were coming within 25 or 50 feet of that, because they're trying to make sure they're protecting to prevent erosion and sedimentation from coming into those waters. And then we would also document the locations of invasive species. And that was something that was helping scientists track the spread of that. And then I'm just going to give a couple of my favorite examples of some projects that I got to work on while I was an ecologist. And the first one was we were doing a bridge replacement, and you can probably see this bridge does not look great. It was, I want to say, I don't have the math on it, but it was at least 80 to 100 years old in rural Georgia. It had not had the best wear and tear on it. It definitely did need to be replaced. But while we were out surveying, we found that there was a state protected mussel on the bridge site. And so as we worked with the designers, we worked to figure out, okay, can we avoid this? Well, they were everywhere, so we couldn't avoid them entirely. So then we talked about, okay, how can we minimize that? And they decided that they would temporarily close the road so that they could just replace the bridge exactly where it was and not have to build a temporary go around, which would disturb the water even more. And then we went out with the state biologist and actually picked up all the mussels we could find and relocated them. And so we spent, it was a good long day out in the water, collecting all of the mussels that we could find, documenting them, and then all of the state protected species got moved upstream. And then every year they actually go back and they document what's going on so they can tell what kind of an impact that bridge replacement may have had on those mussels and how that population that moved upstream is doing. And then bats on bridges. So it's not something a lot of people think about, but bridges are actually a fantastic habitat for bats. They have joints in them because when you're made of concrete and you're dealing with weather, you've got to leave space for it to expand and contract. And so you have the joint in between. And a lot of times there's material stuffed up there, but it falls out. And so you've got this nice, perfect little hole, just the right size for a bat to make its home. Or in the case of this one, several thousand bats. So it was, I think, one of my pleasures to, but also utter disgust. So all of that black you see down there is guano. And we estimated probably, I think it was 1,500 bats at one point in time on this bridge. And that's great for the bats. And at that point, when there are that many bats, we couldn't identify the multi-species. So we can't tell if one of them's a protected species or not. So we had to treat it like it was. And a lot of times we were doing maintenance on these bridges. So it wasn't just a bridge replacement, it was maintenance. And when they do the maintenance, they are kind of refinishing the top. And when they do that, they're stripping everything down and putting it back over. And there's lots of vibration and noise and everything coming down from the top, which is not very great on those bats. So in one particular instance, and this was also one of my favorite days, I got to go out on this machine where we had identified that there were bats. They were getting ready to do the work. And we actually, because we didn't know 100% what the work would do to the bats, we were going to monitor while they were there doing the work, what was happening with the bats. So we went out to check them out. And that is me very, very, very high up there on this machine. And unfortunately well, I guess fortunately for the bats that day, they had already left so they could go ahead and do their work. And we didn't have to remove them and relocate them that day or check out what was going on. So that's just a little bit of some of the stuff I did. And then what's that got to do with the zoo? How did I go from being a transportation ecologist dealing with federal agencies and protected species, and then into the zoo and being the education manager? And one of the things I will say is that a lot of the time while I was at the Department of Transportation, I spent probably 40% of my time educating, because the designers and the maintenance workers and the project managers and all of the people who are doing all of the transportation projects are looking at you like, well, why do you care about this bat? Or why do I need to change how I've designed my road because there's a water there? So I spent a lot of time educating them about why it was, why those resources were important, and quite frankly, the laws surrounding why they needed to do it the way they needed to do it. And then moving on to the zoo, I'm gonna try to do something interactive here. So we're gonna see if this works. So I wanna see if I can do a new share of this. So if you all could go to the website that I've listed below, and it should show up here too. And first, my question, because I always ask this question, is have you been to the zoo, the Virginia Zoo? You can answer yes, no, or I had no idea there was a zoo in Hampton Roads. Kim, gonna call you out there.
No, that's totally fine. That's absolutely fine. And it's funny, it's so funny because I've been to Hampton Roads. Like I, normally go like twice a year for these events.
I don't know if it's working, so I apologize. I'm trying to do that. Oh, hey, I have one. You answered. All right, one has been, and one had no idea there was a zoo in Hampton Roads. All right, 2, yay. All right, so we'll see if this next one works. Because I know this is kind of a hard format to do this in. And I will say that, especially as an informal science educator, I am used to doing a lot of the Socratic method. So I don't really like to lecture as much. So this is a little bit more out of my wheelhouse. So then the next one, and did all of your screens switch as well? Okay, great. So what word or words come to mind when you think of a zoo?
Although if I'm being honest, it's because I live in DC, so.
This is true. And you have a fantastic zoo.
Yeah, I know, we got pandas.
We have red pandas.
Ooh, I do love red pandas. And the ones at the Smithsonian are never out, which is fine. That's their choice. They're able to do that, but I always get a little bummed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I will say I am really excited to see the word conservation. And I think it's because I have a group of teachers here and science teachers at that, because a lot of times when I do this, I get family and entertainment and fun. And a lot of times I don't even hear education. In fact, when I tell people who have nothing to do with science, probably 7 times out of 10 that I'm the education manager at the zoo, they say, "Oh, you do education there?" So I'm really happy to see all of those answers. And so maybe what I have to tell you won't be as revolutionarily groundbreaking as it is sometimes to some people. But so this is just a little bit, the Virginia Zoo, yes, it is about animals. It is, I saw captive breeding. I'm gonna talk a little bit about species survival plans. It is about animals. It is about visitors. It is about engaging and educating and connecting, all of that. But also it is about more than that. So at the Virginia Zoo, our mission is that we are committed to engaging our community in taking action to save the world's wildlife and their ecosystems, because we envision a world where everyone values wildlife and the environment. And to do that, it can't just be teaching you a fact about an animal. It's got to be making that connection and turning engagement into action. And that's really what the modern day zoo is about. It's not just a place of animals. It's a place of promoting the highest welfare that we can, and wildlife, contributing to wildlife conservation, to education, to science, and to diversity and inclusion as well. And the AZA, which I said before, we are an AZA accredited institution, is a regulatory body that puts out an accreditation for zoos, and it is considered the gold standard of animal welfare and sort of that gold standard of zoo. And it is something that everyone who is accredited, goes through every 5 years. We got our accreditation back in 2018. We will be going through the process again in 2023. Every year they use the most recent science in looking at animals. They use the most recent science in talking about education and engagement, and so the social science there. And we've been really taking a look at, are you living up to all of that and to those standards? Some of the conservation programs that the AZA does are, one, the species survival plan. And that is, someone talked about breeding programs. I like to compare the SSP to Ancestry.com meets Match.com. So you are taking a look at the genetics of the animal, as well as taking a look at the personalities. Are they going to match there? And that is something that is a little bit of a fail-safe towards extinction, and really taking a look at making sure that we are being able to continue species, but that we're doing it, genetically in a sustainable manner as well. We also participate in something called SAFE, which is Saving Animals from Extinction. And as the education manager at the zoo, I actually got to participate in one of the SAFE programs, creating the program for monarch butterflies. And we are a program partner. We are one of the signatories on it through all of AZA. And some of the things that we're doing are building more habitat at the zoo for monarch butterflies, and also participating in some community science. I'm going to talk about that in a minute as well. And then we also do conservation. So a certain percentage of the zoo's budget every year goes to conservation, and we have a specific conservation fund. And this is really where I am able to take my unique sort of background in being a field ecologist, melding with the education side of things. And I currently chair our conservation committee at the zoo. And so whenever someone comes to us with a project to say, we'd like to fund this, or do you want to get involved? Our conservation committee takes a look at it, and we're taking a look at it to see, is this something that matches with our mission? Do we feel that the science behind it is sound? And do we feel like it is incorporating? One of the biggest things we look at, especially for our international projects, is it taking a look at the Indigenous people and coordinating them into those efforts as well? So that's something that traditionally we've done a lot of giving of money for our conservation fund. Within the next several years, we have a real push to not just donate the money, but actually be boots on the ground with our staff as well. And that's something that I am spearheading as that background with as an ecologist. So I'm pretty excited and proud of the work that we'll be doing moving forward with that. And then community science at the zoo. And a lot of you may have heard it called citizen science. It's around the community. We're really looking at getting away from the word citizen, because that can be exclusionary, and using that word community. And so that is taking those non-trained scientists, teaching them how to collect some data, or in the case of the Monarch Watch, we went out on grounds and we caught butterflies and tagged them. So scientists are tracking their movement into Mexico. For Frog Watch, we go out to areas around the Hampton Roads First Landing State Park is one of our areas, and are surveying the frog populations. And it's really just taking a look at what's there, and scientists use that data to sort of monitor what's going on. The same thing with Caterpillars Count. That's a project through the University of North Carolina, and we use our grounds, some of the 54 acres that we have, to monitor the invertebrate populations there to help them with their research. And then City Nature Challenge is one that we helped to start last year. It's a big bio blitz. We didn't have any locations on our site last year. We're hoping that within the next couple of years, we might be able to have some more native habitats that will be able to participate and actually be a site as well. But we did train people in how to do it. And if you're interested, we get some ways to get involved. So just a couple ways to get involved with the zoo is, first off, education programs. Obviously, I'm the education manager, so I'm going to plug that. And especially for all of you teachers in Hampton Roads, I want to let you know that this year we've had some amazing corporate sponsors. ADP, which is has a local company here, and several of their people are on our board, and they have been very generous to allow us I think they are funding, it's about 50 programs this year. And then we have a couple other grants that have funded some other programs as well, including Virginia 811 has given us some sponsorships too, to cover the cost of programming for public school teachers in Hampton Roads. And if you are interested in that QR code down at the bottom there will take you straight to a form to fill out. And we're trying to catch as many people as we can. So please share that, please spread that. We have a number of grant proposals that we're waiting to hear back from. And we are really hopeful, and we're a finalist in one from the Peninsula Community Foundation that we'll find out about on November 2nd, that if any of you are Hampton or Newport News, it would fund 3 semesters worth of about 50 programs a semester. So please be in touch with me. I think we've got some great things going on. And then for all of you in sort of the 8th grade or high school, we have our teen volunteer program. And that is the conservation youth team. And it's both youth development and volunteer. And we do things within summer and the school year. But one of the great benefits is that if they volunteer with us the very first summer, they reach their 100 hours that they often need for the National Honor Society or other things. So that application is coming open December 1, and it's going to close February 28th. And it does require, we ask for some teacher recommendations as well. So putting that out there in case you get anyone asking about it. And then please go to the website and learn a little bit more. And then we have adult volunteer opportunities as well. We have our zoo crew, which is our adult volunteers, and they work in education and interpretation. They help with a sort of administration and operations. We have a lot of very dedicated horticulture volunteers. So if you really love gardening in your spare time, we have 54 acres and we have a lot of gardens. And then animal care and conservation. So doing some of those community science projects is something that our volunteers do. And then we also have just started what's called our episodic volunteer program, which is for individuals and families who are looking to pitch in on some special projects, like some of our community science initiatives. We also adopted the Lavalette kayak launch in Norfolk from Keep Norfolk Beautiful. And about twice a month, we go out there, and I'm proud, but also really sad to report that we often pick up like 100 pounds of trash each time, because I wish it wasn't happening every month, but we're out there doing that. And then we've also been working with the Chesapeake Bay Foundation and the Elizabeth River Project on a couple of different restoration projects that we invite people to come and get involved with us as well. So doing that hands-on conservation work. And then do you have any questions? And wow, I don't know why it misspelled my name, but that's an M. That should be an M-I-C-H-E-L-L-E. I think the problem is it always wants to capitalize it. And then when I tell it not to, I don't know. So I apologize. I really do know how to spell my own name. And that is also my office phone number for anyone who wants to learn more about our programs.
And don't worry, because I also, like, it's so early next week, I'll send everyone, basically, I send them a one-sheeter, and then I put everyone, all the speaker contact information. And then I also try to pre-share some links, so in case people are real excited about something that was shared. So you guys will get that next week. So yeah, so don't worry if, in terms of, Dig misspelled your name. And like, to be perfectly honest, the number of times I've told people the wrong date for an event that I'm hosting is unbelievable. Yeah, and then any teachers here, if you have any questions for Michelle, please just chat them to me. Let me double check here. Actually, so while we wait for a question, I have a question.
Yes.
So could you, and because I'm a huge fan of the AZA, mostly because it really changed my perspective on what zoos could do. I grew up going to like the Buffalo Zoo, which is a very sad zoo. And I guess, so I don't know if you could speak to, in some ways, like, because I know one of the things that's really big and that was really important to me when I was thinking about zoo stuff was the idea that, just like the animal exhibits themselves and like, some of those things. Because I think it's really interesting.
Absolutely. And I will say that I've had a number of teachers who zoo exhibit design is a great STEM project. And we do it in our camps, and it's for our middle school camps. And I worked with a 4th grade class at Kings Grant Elementary School last spring, doing one of theirs as well. It's a great PBL for anybody who's interested in that. But I think what Kim is getting at is, if you think of a zoo from 50 years ago, you think of a sad animal sitting on concrete, and that's about it. That's a lot. And so when I talked about the modern zoo and that the modern zoo must do better, that's one of the things we've really learned. And today, especially if you go to our zoo, you go to the Smithsonian, or a lot of any of those AZA accredited institutions, it's exhibit design really has to consider the natural look of things, consider the animal welfare, which includes enrichment opportunities. Enrichment is something that helps to promote and stimulate those natural behaviors. So for us, if you've been to our zoo thinking about the orangutan exhibit, we have that vertical space and we've got a whole lot of area for them to climb in that climbing structure. Kim, up at the National Zoo, you guys even have that.
Got the O-line.
O-line that is amazing. And they even have, I mean, you have the like interactive computer and tablet, and they can like touch things, which really stimulates an ape. That's very important for the apes. And so it's really taking into consideration the size and space, but also what types of things are needed to provide that sort of different interactiveness. And then also making sure you've got plenty of choice to give the animal so that they can choose if they want to go inside or outside or be somewhere hidden if they don't want to be seen or be somewhere out. So choice is very important in exhibit design.
Awesome. Thank you. No, actually, I went and looked it up because I was curious, because I went to the Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago one time. Yeah. And they must have changed some things, because I remember when I went there, I was like, oh, those are some sad exhibits.
But they have. They look very nice now.
Yeah, no, it's been like, it's been at least like 7 or 8 years since I've been to Lincoln Park Zoo. So yeah, and I was like, man, can't be, they're AZA accredited with those cages, but they must have improved things. Okay, let me see if we have. So I guess could you kind of like explain like what drew you to like ecology? I guess like anything in particular.
Yeah, I've always been interested in the natural world, but I started out environmental science and chemistry major in college, and then I spent a semester in Australia with the School for International Training, which instead of just going to like a class or a regular university, their whole thing is it's a field studies based program. And you go out and are actually in the environment, learning a lot about it. And you have to do a project on your own. And I studied ants and beetles while I was there and sort of looking at some fire ecology, and I got a professor to sponsor me. And that just, I never looked back after that. It was all about bugs and the creepy crawlies at that point.
Awesome. And so I just have to real quick, because I think it's actually I personally think it's funny. You guys might enjoy this. I used to work with African refugee and immigrant kids, and I took them to the zoo one time. Heather, this because your comment reminded me of this. And someone came up and they were like, "Oh, have you ever seen a millipede?" And I had a kid with me, and he was like, "Oh yeah, no." He's like, "We used to farm millipedes," and like it was so wild to have this kid tell this adult volunteer who clearly knows what she's talking about. Like he's like, "No, I know what." Let me tell you something about millipedes. But it was just it was a hilarious interaction, and makes me, really appreciate, I guess, zoo staff, because they were like, "Oh, I'd love to hear more about this." So I think that's all the questions we have. Thank you so much, Michelle, for presenting. If we were in person, we'd all clap for you. Yay. And we'll certainly be in touch, because I actually have I need to pick your brain about something else. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to figure out how to connect animal husbandry with like nursing.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I think I can.
I've got some thoughts too.
Or veterinary. Yeah, I can definitely help you with that.
Okay, perfect. That's because I'm needing some help on that one.
Yes.
Yeah, and certainly I'm really excited to share out the resources, and especially because we're doing some virtual stuff. And then I will also make sure to send some of those resources to some of my science coordinators that I know out there.
Yes,
and hopefully
please.
they can get it out. Okay, and then with that, Noushin, it's all you.
All right. Well, very nice. What a tough act to follow. I hope I can keep your interest. Let me make sure. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes. I don't worry. I mean, it's a bunch of science teachers. They love stuff like this.
All right. No, that was very nice. I knew there was a zoo here. I used to vacation in Virginia Beach area all the time, and now here I am working in the area. So thank you for having me on the call today. And again, we have Michael online as well, so he can help me as far as any kind of opportunities for careers. So he can take the lead on that. But so just wanted to introduce myself. I am Noushin Sprossel. I am the Director of Safety, Health, and Environmental for ship repair here, BAE Systems ship repair business. When I got approached by Michael and team, I was very excited to do this. Teaching and helping others understand why we do things we do has always been a passion of mine. It doesn't matter if it's a kindergartner, Boy Scouts, Cub Scouts, high school level, even in college. So any opportunity I have, I like to share the story of science with you. With that in mind, I'm going to attempt to share my screen with you. And let's see if you can please give me a confirmation if you can see my screen or not. Excellent. All right. So let me move this out of the way. Okay. So I created a few slides. I'll go through them. But before I do, I just wanted to mention that I am not in official on an official BAE system outing here. So just wanted to make sure that I'm not functioning in that capacity, although I might, you might see references to the organization or name of the business and use of the logos. I just wanted to make sure that that was not, observed as such. So what you're looking at here is one of our what we call a dry dock. This is how we bring ships out of the water when they come to us for repair. So very close probably to what Michelle has shared with us with some of her experiences as far as activities around bodies of water. So you can imagine this water is in the middle, but when the ship goes on it and it comes out of the water, guess what? The ship's on that structure and it's out of the water. So I just wanted to let you look at that picture as an opening, and you might think, what in the world does that have to do with STEM options, or STEM programs? So with that, I created some slides, and I like the opportunity to just share my story with you a little bit. Different approach than what Michelle has taken, but I find myself in a very rewarding and exciting career. I've been doing this for many years, and my interests still grow. I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up because opportunities are endless. So a little bit of my academic background, I had promised when my parents wanted me to be a medical professional, a doctor. I tried several times with MCAT. I just didn't get selected. So my academic career took a turn. After getting a bachelor's in biology, I was able to go to graduate school. I did apply for NIOSH grant, National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. And with that, I was able to achieve a dual master's. One was in industrial hygiene, which we'll talk about that a little bit. And the other one was in hazardous material management. So as I went through graduate studies, I was able to continue my career in healthcare. So I did support a few specialists and surgeons at that time. After I graduated, I found myself as a health, safety, and environmental professional in utilities, power generation in South Carolina. My career grew within that organization and environment, and I went to the chemical manufacturing side just to get exposed to more opportunities in identifying what responsible management of chemicals are in a manufacturing world. From there, opportunity came available, so I switched again in the same line of profession into a mining industry in surface mining. So you can imagine how much of the ecosystems they would be impacting. And from there, I landed where I am today with BAE Systems, National Security or defense company. I apologize for that typo there, but so it's been a long, kind of a turn of events for me, but very much rewarding and very exciting. And I just wanted to kind of share a little bit of that with you. I am a certified industrial hygienist. So even within our profession, there is certification and growth opportunities. There are many other certifications on the environmental side and on the safety side. They all do require education and credentials, academic credentials from ABET accredited schools, because many of these areas that I'll be sharing with you, they're highly focused and to be honest with you, would not be possible without you relying on the sciences and math and engineering, as I'm hoping to present to you in the next slide. So a little bit just an overview. This is my health and safety and environmental oversight responsibilities in 3 of our yards. You can see the locations. When you see it from up above, it kind of gives you a little bit of different perspective. This is Norfolk right here on Elizabeth River. You can see all the number of dry docks and piers that we have with the ships at hand. This one is in Jacksonville, only a couple of miles from the ocean. That's the waterway right here. And of course, in the beautiful San Diego, you can see we also have all the access to the open water and how careful we have to operate as we are right there in the body of the water. So my journey continues. This is a little bit different than your mining facilities, if you will, when you are on dry land trying to dig up, whatever elements or material you're looking for, and certainly different than a manufacturing facility where you're working within the confines of buildings. So just wanted to give that to you as a perspective. Many employees, diverse workforce, many visitors. This is a business where we have to work with, maintaining, repairing, or modernizing, Navy force vessels and or commercial vessels that come to us. So it's a great and tremendous responsibility and pride that comes with that as we operate in these communities. So how does that tie to background in STEM and all the sciences, and what does it mean? How do we take what we learn in school? How have I learned that, and how do I apply it? So safety, health, and environmental compliance is not just something that the companies these days have to do because it's a requirement. I think most of the companies in this day and age want to be a responsible community member, which means they're going to do the right things and above and beyond what the regulations at times calls for, which is quite often. So programs that we have to implement safety regulation, safety programs for our employees, our visitors, contractors, health-related programs for the same, especially our employees. And there are environmental regulations and standards. All of those are governed by a certain set of standards. So industrial hygiene, just to give you a perspective, is the study and science of looking at employee exposures to different kind of health stressors. That could be heat-related, chemical-related, could be items such as physical in nature, like heat and cold, radiological, nuclear, biological, all of that, because as a living body, we can get exposed to those things. So the science of industrial hygiene walks us through that. Safety regulations are basically, again, I've tried to simplify these a little bit just for our purposes here, just for discussion. Addresses our exposure to physical hazards at work, such as moving vehicles, control of hazardous energy, rigging material items as such. And of course, environmental protection that we talked about. I think environmental regulations are very much close to also health regulations, but it is a huge responsibility that we have to help the crowds and the manufacturers and all these industries understand. So we are kind of an informal educator on a different scale, and it's a pretty diverse environment. Again, federal, state, local rules and regulations, and contractual, because in this line of work right now, it is considered a federal a contractor type environment, so we have to abide by those as well. And then we have what we have as a consensus standard. So on the right-hand side, I'll just show you some of those organizations that you might be familiar with. OSHA, Occupational Safety and Health Administration. We have Department of Transportation. Michelle spoke about DOT. There's that one right there for you. They're very much very involved in our world. Anytime you're on public roads, and that's where they get pulled in. NIOSH, we spoke about a lot. NIOSH is one of the CDC companies, Center for Disease Control, and I'm sure you've heard a lot about this one here in the world of COVID as it pertains to protecting against the bioaerosols of the late. NIOSH is the education arm for OSHA, and also within CDC, they do a lot of research when it comes to occupational health. Environmental Protection Agency, National Fire Protection Administration, and also we have ASME, the Association this is for the mechanical engineers. These guys or ladies, they do mandate a lot of items on for example, ventilation, HVAC, or any kind of structural items that you might be dealing with. And of course, we have the American National Standard Institute, ANSI. They do specify requirements based on science in how strong should a hard hat be, how strong should safety glasses be. NIOSH, for example, tells us which respirators and which respirators actually are protective against what agents or stressors. So just wanted to kind of give you a view, very small aperture into the exciting world of opportunities as STEM proficient professionals, where we can be very gainfully employed for many years to come. So how does it support the SHE process? That's safety, health, and environment. To be honest with you, it's the key that enables us to manage these programs. Without having these sets of skills and knowledge, it just becomes very difficult and very quickly. So that's how you set apart the SHE professionals from, let's say, a frontline employee that might be working in a safety profession or safety profession. So we talked a little bit about industrial hygiene. We have to use the science to identify the hazards, evaluate them, see how much of a hazard it is, and then what are the controls. So as an industrial hygienist, that's what we do. We look at biological, chemical, physical, or any other radiological stressors in the work environment, and we have to know how to calculate those. Calculating concentrations versus, if it's a liquid, if it's a mixture, is it a vapor, is it a dust? All of that comes into play. So you can imagine that you're constantly maneuvering through these pillars back and forth. We look at epidemiological studies to just see what studies have been done before, what is the population impacted, what's the standard deviation, what's our confidence in saying that, okay, I measured XYZ amount, is that good enough, or is that protective or not? So it's a lot of, again, maneuvering back and forth between all these areas, that we get to learn through the STEM programs. Controls are huge. This is where we get to sit and design ventilation. What do I mean by that? Hoods that you see in the lab, or you might have 20 grinding stations throughout a manufacturing floor. So you're going to try to decide how much air you have to pull from each of those locations. How long should the ductwork be? How fast should the fans pull this material in? So all of that relies on your very good, solid knowledge of science to be able to do that. Safety-wise, cannot emphasize that enough. People fall at work, so you got to make sure you have adequate fall protection there. Handrails, guardrails, toe boards, stair height, all of those are designed to a certain specification. So as safety professionals, we have to monitor that. They're grandfather rules. Certain buildings are grandfathered, so you can't just go break them down or do something different. So you need to understand some of those codes that we have to abide by. Cranes, we lift items all the time. How strong of a sling you need? What is the lift angle? Is it appropriate for the kind of lift you're doing? Flammability of compounds that we have to deal with, because that's pretty important. You need to understand the concept of combustion and flammability. How do you what concentrations are the ones that you can tolerate, and what you got to do to control those hazards and mitigate. And we talk a little bit about environmental protection, where we have to know how to calculate flow rates, calculate emission rates. What controls do manufacturing or any business that is adding effluents or emissions to these work environments have to implement? What are the rules around that? And obviously you have to monitor, and there's going to be reporting requirements, because that's what the regulations state, and that's the right thing to do. So key to success, you can see it's kind of embedded in all aspects of what we do on a daily basis. Just wanted to give you a little bit more viewing. I wasn't quite sure to what level of detail we wanted to take this, but as STEM professionals, it just gives you a little bit of idea about the scientific processes that we have to do in the world of industrial hygiene. Identification, if you suspect you have certain chemicals in the workplace, either by looking at the safety data, or if you're manufacturing something, you got to figure out if you have any intermediate products, and you have to rely on your stoichiometry and kind of understand how the molecules behave with each other and what you're trying to drive to. So that's when you have to rely on that data. If you know what you have, they're typically, I just give you some snapshots as examples. You might want to go and evaluate how big of a benzene problem you might have in a work environment. So there is a methodology to be used for you to evaluate that hazard, to see how much concentration of benzene you might have on the manufacturing floor. It tells you what the stressor is, how much air you have to pull, what kind of pump you have to use, what kind of sample media you have to use. And I just put some pictures here to show you what we're talking about here. So you've got pumps that you have to then make sure you calibrate them, material that you have to connect to the sampling train. So yes, I've got a pump, but there's a Tygon tubing, then it goes to a sample media, then you hang it up on the people's like shoulder in the breathing zone. You might have seen that, where in manufacturing areas, people are collecting samples. It's really not listening to people talk. It's just looking at actually how to collect enough from their breathing zone area so we can send it for analysis based on what method we were using. Then once you get the results, you can see there are some calculations here, like it shows you the ppms here, it shows you the TLV, the threshold limit value for some kind of a mixture. So you have to calculate the exposure amounts based on those samples and come up with a number. Many chemicals have regulatory limits that basically states below that limit there is no indication or studies that have shown that there is adverse impact. Now, unfortunately, some of the regulatory atmosphere, such as in OSHA regulations, those permissible exposure limits are very old. So we rely on other organizations that have updated data in what values to use for that. So you know how to measure, you go do measure properly with the right equipment. Then you calculate it, then you're going to look at, okay, how am I going to eliminate that hazard? So engineering controls, that's where you actually eliminate the hazard out of the way. Obviously, substitution is the best thing. If you can't substitute products, you have to probably look at major engineering controls. So that's when we sit down and design ductwork, fans, hoods. This is again just a very brief example for you guys to get an idea about this. And once you do that, it might not still be enough because you might still have exposure out there in the field. So you have to then rely on personal protective equipment. But which one you pick is important. Cartridges mean different things, especially if you're dealing with some kind of respiratory stressor based on, let's say, if it's an organic item versus particulate, there's a science behind that. But then you can't just expect people to wear these kind of respirators that are tight fitting. It makes a seal on your face. You have to do a fit testing to make sure it's adequately protective of what's out in the outside environment. So when the air passes through those filters and through those filters only, then it's safe for the employee to be in that atmosphere. But you still need to know what is the protection factor for this kind of respirator versus what firefighters wear, like an SCBA, the self-contained breathing apparatus. And once you do those measurements, you put them in a respirator, but you still got to sample on and off to manage that. So your sampling activities never stop. So you do continuous maintenance. But as you can see, we got to be cognizant of what we are sampling. You need to know the anatomy and physiology of a human body, know what the toxicology of the chemicals is that you're dealing with, rely on the chemistry and know how it interacts with the human body in terms of the target organs, do the math on appropriate calculations, look at your statistical data, look at epidemiological data that you might have, look at the physics, because this is, you're looking at all these ventilation calculations. And last but not least, on top of the STEM activities, we always got to be aware that we're dealing with human beings. So your employee relations, how you communicate this, how you educate your employees so they know that you're not reading their kind of, brain waves when you are doing the fit test here at this in picture. It's amazing what you find yourself trying to explain to your workforce, but it's exciting. I hope I'm painting an exciting picture for you in all the levels of STEM that is involved in the world of industrial hygiene. Moving on a little bit to safety, trying to look at the time and be sensitive to that. Lots of mathematical calculations, lots of looking at physics concepts, and of course the chemistry when it comes to flammability and combustion materials as well. I gave you some pictures here. For example, being able to calculate force, fall protection, where can people tie off to, right? What force should that anchorage point maintain or offer for somebody to be able to tie off to, so if they fall, that vertical force will not cause a failure of the anchorage point and cause a fall or hitting the ground. Cranes and lifting, there's a science around signage, how they move the crane around, but more important than that, before they can even lift it, how do you calculate the load? Has that load reached a certain capacity of the equipment? What are your programs in managing that? At what point do you draw the line as a threshold? Electrical energy, the high voltage energy, that's pretty important program, especially in utilities companies. They're gurus at working with that, but at manufacturing or even in our homes, there's a lot that goes behind that. You got arc flash, you got to understand the resistance, you got to understand the conductivity. So there's a lot of physics that goes behind that as well. So we need to be very much aware of that. And I do believe the last area I just wanted to spend a few minutes on, again, echoing on what Michelle had shared with us, environmental protection. You have Clean Air Act that protects against many of the emissions that come from industrial activity and vehicles and other things we do. It does impact our air. So a lot of industry is regulated. Believe it or not, just as a few examples, even in a shipyard, you might think, well, what does shipyard have? They don't have a smokestack. True, but we have emergency diesel generators. We have all kinds of other things we have to work with within the confines of the environment. Water. Water is a very valuable resource for us, and you saw where we sit. We are familiar with the Elizabeth River project. We do have some projects actually that we support on our sites as well, but any water that we use and also any water that we treat and return back to the environment, we have to manage that. There might be dredging involved, there might be all kinds of things involved, but the entire science behind that is at play also. We have to take samples, we have to look at the effluents, make sure what concentrations are the chemicals that we have identified or are identified on the permits need to be levels, what levels they need to adhere to, for us to be able to discharge back to the body of the water. Hazardous waste regulations are very strict. You can't just throw anything away just because we assume it is, okay. We have to index the waste. We have to analyze it. We have to determine, yes, this is just office trash, we're good to throw that away. Or if we have a can of some sort of ethyl, methyl, yuck, we're going to have to analyze it, make sure, okay, where does it go? Do we just put it in this container versus here, and where does it end up? Because the hazardous waste regulations, you might hear about this, cradle to grave. It's the responsibility of the manufacturers or the people that generate that waste under that EPA ID number to be responsible community members and make sure they do the right things with it. Then you have reporting of chemicals, any chemical we use, if they are on a particular list that EPA has available, we have to report how much we have used of them. Some thresholds are as low as about 10 pounds. So you can imagine when you're looking at a multi-acre facility, what rigorous methodology has to be in place to calculate, even based on a percentage of that particular chemical weight-wise that you have used and released to the environment by the virtue of having used it. So lots of activities. Again, it brings calculations, statistics, modeling, because you have to kind of be able to guess how much a process might emit into air or in a body of water that you have to treat before you release it. So many opportunities in this front as well. So what lies ahead from a STEM perspective for me as a true STEM professional, that I have to use it is applied. It's not just in theory. We have to make sense of what we learned so we can apply it to our environment. It is there to help us identify and assess the hazards, no doubt. It is important to be a STEM professional so we can eliminate those hazards using those skills and knowledge. We have to use it to implement effective controls. Absolutely is imperative. It also promotes responsible communities. You might hear of sustainability. That's a buzzword. That's what it is. You rely on the science. Okay, how can I recycle something as opposed to creating more waste? So you look at your chemical composition potentially, just as an example, can I substitute that product with something else that gives me the same kind of reaction, but it's not hazardous to the community, to the environment, to the people at work? Although you have control means, but you always want to be a more sustainable company. And for me, I hear a lot of argument about artificial intelligence movement. A lot of people think, oh my goodness, it's going to take the job of the people away. I don't believe it. You still need the proficient professionals that know the science so they can interpret that data, make sure that it's looking at the right things. So it's a very exciting future, actually, when you pair up the STEM programs with the artificial intelligence, and that is a very exciting world for us. So I do believe this is my last slide, if I'm not mistaken. This is my contact information. I'm going to open the floor to some discussions, and again, Mike is also with us here from our HR team, and I'm certain he can help us with resources and questions that you might have. So Kim, I'm going to turn it over to you for any questions.
Yeah, we do have some questions. The first question we have is, could you explain the difference between OSHA and NOISH? I don't know how to say it.
NIOSH. Okay.
NIOSH, yeah.
So NIOSH is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health. So they do a lot of research, they collect data. They're a tremendous resource. We refer to them as the education arm for OSHA. Not 100% true, but what they do a lot of education and research camps. So based on what they do in different arenas, it could be fall protection, it could be some kind of a toxic chemical, or what they do, they actually do studies, they do measurements, then they do the epidemiological statistical analysis. And based on that aspect, the information is made available to the industry. Now, I can tell you that NIOSH is a very important player for respiratory protection. Again, I'm not referring to just these masks that we wear these days for COVID, where actually they define what a respirator is. They actually have to have a certification, not just for the type it is, but also the cartridges that go for what chemicals. So that's what they do. Now, OSHA is actually the regulating agency. So there are some states that have state OSHA, which means that not only they have to meet the federal OSHA requirements, they can be more strict, okay? So OSHA will enforce compliance for your employer. If you're like in a state program, they enforce compliance for industry. They have different branches of course, it's a very vertical type organization. You have maritime for ships. You could have, then you also have another agency under Department of Labor for mining. So they regulate and they enforce. Hope
Awesome.
that answered you.
No, thank you so much. I was at you mentioned both, and I was like, okay, I'm hearing occupational like safety and health, but I'm not actually, just occurred to me, don't know the difference between the two.
They are, there's a lot out there. You have local jurisdictions that apply, especially in California, as far as environmental requirements. So yeah, it's very multifaceted. It's absolutely fascinating. You have to kind of have a pretty good understanding of what regulations and standards apply to what you do. So.
And I guess speaking of all of the things that you just spoke about, I mean, I guess I'm assuming that you don't do all of this. So I guess who do you work with? Who's doing some of these things that you've referenced?
Yeah, so I don't do all of this by myself. I can't possibly. I do what I do because I have a great team. We have a large population of, I call safety, health, and environmental professionals at each location. We have safety professionals, we have health professionals, we have clinics at all the sites. So everything is pretty well defined, and at each level, they have to have the right set of skills. And training is ongoing. You constantly have to keep up with training. We are also, part of associations. There's several that help with resources. I mentioned that I was a certified industrial hygienist. That's through American Board of Industrial Hygiene. That accreditation is actually recognized globally. We do have other agencies that do offer certification, local agencies, other associations, for example, Virginia Ship Repair Association right here in Norfolk. And it's a very nice association for the ship repair industries in our area. BAE is not the only one. So we do meet on routine basis, and we do offer educational opportunities for our employees. So there's many courses that we send our technicians to help us run these programs.
Awesome, thank you. And we have a question here, and I guess something that, I mean, I've certainly heard this too, is, like, do you guys do underwater welding at your facilities? Because I know, like, just in terms of, like, a, dangerous jobs and safety stuff.
Right. I could tell you this. We do have specialists that do that job. It is a niche. It's something that you don't want to just have your welder that welds above the water to go underwater and do. So it's very likely that we have professionals hired in as a contract basis to do that kind of work. Yes. Yes. And it's I mean, as you can imagine, I didn't speak at all to the security. That's another layer of regulations that goes on top of this. But yeah, so a lot of consideration, but that is certainly a unique and exciting opportunity to go under than weld at the same time.
I have a friend who's really good at welding, and I've been trying to convince him. And he's like also really likes diving, and he's just like, yeah, but I don't like welding that much. And I'm like, I'm just saying you can make like a lot of money. And he's like, yeah, but I just hate welding. And again, speaking of all of the things that are happening, I guess what parts, I mean, because you mentioned having, doing biology for, an undergrad, I guess, how does that inform and help you with all of the things that you need to look at and try to figure out and calculate? Right.
So anatomy and biology, right? I mean, I've always been passionate about it. I was, very good at biochemistry. I wasn't very liked from that perspective because you can ruin people's curves. So I've been guilty of that before, but it always made sense for me. And then when I did not get to medical school, I always look at those situations as an opportunity. I believe that if as any professional or any individual, if you have given it all and some things don't happen, I would not look at that as a negative. I think we need to look at those opportunities truly as an opportunity that they are. When that did not happen for me, I was pretty good at biochemistry. I heard about the industrial hygiene program. I loved it because I had to use the knowledge of how Krebs cycle worked, how mitochondria worked, how the muscles work, what does the lung do, what does the kidney and liver do? Because anything that you inhale, your body has to process it and get rid of if it can. So it's either involving your kidney, liver, your skin, your lungs. So that's how the two got connected. As I studied more about it, I also, during my graduate studies, found out how close it was related to the environmental regulations and the hazardous materials. So it was a natural choice for me to get the dual master's at that time, because I think it's connected. As professionals, everything, if we keep that in mind, the science will guide us through what we have to do and make the right decision. We got to adhere to scientific approach on everything we do.
Oh, thank you. Actually, I really enjoyed that answer.
Okay, good. Well, glad you liked it. And I really mean it. I really go by that. I'm a true believer.
No, but I mean, so to be fair, I have a biochemistry degree. I have never used it. Turns out I hate lab work. And I thought the only other thing you could do was become a doctor, and I didn't want to do that either. So then I ended up in education. But I will say, certainly that having a biochemistry degree helps me all the time with putting together reports, figuring out, my latest passion project is figuring out how to better communicate to educators and everyone, like what are these post-secondary pathways and education opportunities? Because sometimes it seems really confusing, but I actually don't think it's that hard. I mean, it is a little hard, but it's not as hard as I think we make it. So, and then Michael, to not leave you out, could you share a little bit about some of the apprenticeship stuff you guys do? Because I think it's really interesting, and I think it's a fabulous opportunity for especially our Hampton Roads teachers and their students.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm head of the talent outreach department. And one of our areas is the apprenticeship program that we have here in Norfolk, Virginia. So we have partnerships with high schools and even middle schools in the Hampton Roads area. We also have partnerships with New Horizons to get those folks who are technical, have that background like Noushin was talking about with cranes. You have to know all that science that it goes in and for lifting. So we have riggers, we have crane operators, we have welders, we have ship fitters, et cetera, electricians. And so that's a lot of technical background. So we do a lot of outreach with all of these schools to bring in. We have roughly about an average of 40 apprentices per year. That is in the May timeframe. We start recruiting in the April timeframe, and they usually start around the September first week or so after Labor Day. It's a great opportunity. It's a 4-year on-the-job training program. They get paid to come in and learn from their craft instructors, their trades. They get raises every 6 months based on their performance. And after 4 years, they're top level journeymen as they graduate. So, you know, we like really promoting this program because these students get the opportunity to go through, get a top rate job, get some education. We partner with Tidewater Community College as well. So they come out of this program debt free and have a job. And if they want to continue their education, BA Systems is looking at opportunities for them to continue their education if they want to go on to either business or engineering or whatever they want to do. So we also have internship programs as well. Noushin was talking about you know, all the programs there for safety, health, and environmental. So we have interns that work year round with us. They're with the largest cadre usually coming in the summertime, but we work interns with schools like Old Dominion, Virginia Tech, obviously the community colleges as well, to bring on students and work with us. And that's local and nationwide as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know, especially down there, I mean, shipbuilding's the whole thing. It's kind of a big industry.
Absolutely.
So I think, and I mean, I think it's really exciting because some of those, you know, because welding is transferable. Being an electrician is, you
Absolutely.
know, go do something else.
Absolutely.
So, but yeah, okay. So it is 6:30. We should probably wrap this up. But Noushin and Mike, thank you both so very much for joining us today. Mike, I actually need to contact you to make sure that you are in touch with some people I've talked to fairly recently who probably really want to talk to you. So Noushin, Michael, and Michelle, thank you so much.